Welcome and relax. Take a moment to settle in, breathe deeply, and let your mind drift. Feel the quiet around you, the gentle rhythm of your thoughts, and the calm that surrounds this moment. Listen and simply be. Before cities rose tall and theaters drew crowds, before coins clinked in pockets and sports fields were marked in chalk, humans sought something far simpler: play. The urge to move, to compete, to imagine, to be entertained was not born in stadiums or cinemas. It was born in the quiet corners of villages, in dusty plains, and along riverbanks where children and elders alike found moments of joy and challenge. Imagine a small settlement long before history wrote its earliest tales. The sun hovers low over the horizon, bathing mud brick homes in soft golden light. Children chase each other through the narrow streets, laughter spilling like water over stones. There are no rules written on paper, no referees with whistles, yet the games are structured, alive with imagination. A simple stick becomes a sword, a bundle of reeds a bow, and every pebble tossed counts as a point in an invisible score. Some games test skill, some test luck, some test courage, and some, in their quiet simplicity, teach lessons. A young boy balances on the edge of a stream, hopping from rock to rock. Each step requires attention, and the boy's heart pounds, not with fear, but with the thrill of succeeding where the river could have claimed him. Nearby, a girl tosses small stones into the water, timing their skips and imagining they are messenger birds flying to distant lands. In these moments, play is both entertainment and practice, preparing minds and bodies for a world that is unpredictable, wild, and demanding. As night approaches, fires are lit and shadows stretch across the ground. Adults gather not to watch competitions with cheering crowds, but to observe, to teach, and sometimes to challenge. There is a ball made from woven reeds, lopsided and uneven, and it is kicked, thrown, and chased across the dusty earth. Rules change with each round, depending on who is playing and what they imagine. What matters is the act itself, the movement, the laughter, the subtle sense of shared experience. Even the simplest games carry stories. One game involves hiding small objects beneath leaves, while the other participants guess and search. A child who finds a hidden object becomes a hero in the moment, celebrated quietly with smiles and whispers. Another involves running between designated points without being touched, a chase as ancient as the plains themselves. The thrill of avoidance, of speed, of cunning is familiar to anyone who has ever felt the wind press against their face in a sudden sprint. Sometimes entertainment is not competitive at all. Dancing in circles, clapping hands, mimicking animals, creating music with sticks and stones, these are performances of joy rather than victory. In the evenings, drums may echo softly across the village, accompanied by singing or chanting, simple tunes repeated again and again, each note holding the warmth of a shared heartbeat. Stories are told alongside the music, tales of ancestors, of battles won and lost, of animals cleverer than humans, of rivers that run backward in the imagination. The boundary between play and story is thin, blurred, and endlessly fascinating. Travelers passing through a settlement notice the games and often join in. A visitor from a distant land may introduce a new game, perhaps tossing a small leather pouch filled with seeds or stones, teaching a challenge that measures both precision and luck. Soon, children adapted, changing the rules, laughing at mistakes, celebrating minor victories. These games are living, evolving, and entirely social, a bridge between strangers, a quiet form of entertainment that does not require money, materials, or elaborate construction. And yet, even in their simplicity, games carry lessons. The boy who learns to throw accurately may one day hunt more successfully. The child who counts steps or keeps track of a pattern develops attention and memory. The runner who escapes a friend in a chase experiences strategy and timing. Play is entertainment, yes, but also preparation. And perhaps this is why humans have played from the beginning, because joy and learning often travel hand in hand. As darkness deepens, lanterns flicker, and families settle for the night. Children lie awake, recalling the day's games, practicing moves in their minds, imagining new variations. The quiet excitement of play lingers like a soft hum. Outside, the stars stretch endlessly, reminding all who gaze upon them that the world is vast, mysterious, and full of possibility. And in the hearts of these early humans, the urge to play, to entertain, to delight in movement and creativity continues to pulse quietly, carrying forward a tradition that will endure for millennia. As the sun climbs higher, painting the village in soft, golden light, the sounds of play continue to echo across the open fields. The laughter of children is no longer just a fleeting noise. It becomes a rhythm, a quiet heartbeat of the settlement. They invent games from the simplest things: a stick, a stone, a bundle of reeds. What might appear chaotic to an outside observer is, in fact, a carefully orchestrated dance of creativity. Every throw, every run, every attempt to balance or aim carries a lesson that is at once playful and profound. Across the dusty plains, a group of children gathers for a game of tag. The rules are unspoken but universally understood. The chase is the point, the strategy the thrill, the laughter the reward. One child darts left, then right, barely avoiding a hand reaching out, while another anticipates the movement, learning instinctively about timing and observation. Here, in these small, fleeting moments, the foundations of agility, awareness, and social cooperation are quietly being laid. Play, in its simplest form, becomes preparation for life, though it is never framed that way. In the shade of a great tree, older children engage in a game that involves tossing small objects with precision. Each attempt requires focus, calculation, and patience. They take turns, silently observing one another, learning not just how to succeed, but how to watch, to wait, and to respect the rules of a shared challenge. There is no scoreboard, no audience demanding applause, only the satisfaction of skill, the soft thrill of improvement, and the quiet acknowledgement of a job well done. Nearby, the elders join in their own forms of amusement. They gather in small circles, playing games that are as much about memory as they are about luck. Pieces of carved wood, small stones, or knotted strings are moved and counted with careful thought, as each play carries both entertainment and subtle education. In these moments, play serves as a bridge between generations, a subtle thread connecting the curiosity of youth with the experience of age. Each laugh, each gentle nudge becomes a story in itself, a story of connection, of shared life, and of a world both challenging and nurturing. And yet, not all play is structured. In some corners, children create imaginary worlds, mimicking animals, pretending to hunt or trade, inventing heroes and villains that exist only in the mind. One girl crouches low in the grass, pretending to stalk invisible prey, while another spins in a circle, imagining herself flying across endless plains. These improvisational games, ephemeral as they may be, teach imagination and creativity, the very tools that will help humans adapt to a world that is vast, unpredictable, and often unforgiving. The rhythm of the day shifts as the sun reaches its peak. Games continue, slower now, more reflective. A boy practices skipping a small leather pouch across water, learning patience and timing with each throw. A group of girls sits nearby, weaving patterns in the sand with sticks, silently competing without words, celebrating small victories with smiles and glances. In these acts, there is a quiet artistry, an elegance in simplicity, a mindfulness that carries a subtle power. When afternoon drifts toward evening, the sounds of play soften, blending with the whispers of the wind through the trees. Children are tired, but their eyes are bright with the satisfaction of the day's adventures. They lie on the ground, imagining new games, replaying victories and near misses in their minds, letting their thoughts wander across the landscape of possibility. The village itself seems to exhale, a quiet acceptance of the rhythm of life, the balance of work, rest, and play. And it is here, in these small, everyday acts, that entertainment becomes timeless. There are no records, no monuments, no written histories that will capture these fleeting moments, yet they endure quietly within the hearts of those who played as a memory that whispers across generations. In laughter, in chase, in imagination, humans discovered joy, and in discovering joy, they also discovered one of the most essential elements of life itself, the simple, enduring power of play. As twilight falls, shadows stretch long across the fields. Fires flicker softly, illuminating the faces of those who remain awake. The stories of the day's games are recounted in whispers, in mimicry, in laughter that lingers like a soft echo. And as night deepens, the spirit of play, the creativity, the connection, the quiet lessons settles into the world, ready to awaken again with the first light of dawn. As night slowly settles over the village, the energy of the day softens, but it does not disappear. It lingers in the dust beneath bare feet, in the faint echo of laughter drifting between homes, in the quiet satisfaction resting behind tired eyes. The games may have ended, but their presence remains. By the light of small fires, elders gather in gentle circles. Their movements are slower now, deliberate, thoughtful. They draw lines into the earth. They place small carved stones inside those markings. A simple game begins, one that requires memory, patience, and quiet strategy. There is no grand prize, no cheering crowd, only attention. Each move is made carefully, almost ceremonially. A stone is shifted, a pause follows, another stone moves. The flicker of firelight casts long shadows, making every motion feel significant. The children watch from a distance at first, then inch closer, curious. They are learning not because someone instructs them, but because they observe. In this moment, play becomes something deeper. It becomes a lesson in restraint, in foresight, in thinking beyond the present move. And yet, even here there is warmth, a subtle smile when someone outmaneuvers another, a soft chuckle when a mistake is made. The competition is gentle, wrapped in mutual respect. Across the clearing, younger children continue their own world of imagination. A stick becomes a spear, a flat rock becomes a shield. One declares himself guardian of an invisible treasure. Another pretends to defend a village from creatures that exist only in thought. They run, they duck, they shout softly into the evening air. But even in fantasy, something real is forming. Courage, coordination, collaboration. They invent rules as they go, they break them, they argue briefly, then resolve it themselves. In these improvised worlds, they practice leadership and compromise without realizing it. A traveler resting near the edge of the settlement watches quietly. Perhaps in his homeland, the games are different. Perhaps they toss carved bones instead of stones. Perhaps they race across open plains rather than through clustered homes. But when one of the children gestures for him to join, he understands. The language of play needs no translation. He tosses a small pouch toward a marked spot in the dirt. It lands just short. Laughter ripples, not mocking, but inviting. He tries again, this time closer. Connection forms without words. As twilight deepens, the games grow slower, movements become softer, the air cools, a faint breeze carries the scent of earth and firewood. A small group begins clapping in rhythm, not loud, not wild, but steady. Someone taps two sticks together, another hums a low melody. Gradually, a quiet music rises. There is no stage, no performers. Everyone is both audience and participant. Children sway, elders nod to the beat. The rhythm echoes something ancient, perhaps the cadence of walking long distances, perhaps the heartbeat itself. Entertainment here is not separate from life, it is life. It binds the community in invisible threads. It eases tension after labor. It strengthens bonds without formal ceremony. It reminds each person that beyond survival, there is joy. Later, when the fires dim and families retreat indoors, the mind continues to play. A boy reimagines the throw he almost perfected. A girl replays the moment she outran her friends. An elder reflects on a clever move that surprised him. Even in stillness, play continues, now inside the imagination, and that may be its greatest power. Games are not merely distractions from hardship, they are rehearsals for possibility. They train the body gently, they sharpen the mind quietly, they strengthen relationships naturally. Under a sky scattered with quiet stars, the village finally rests. But tomorrow, when the sun rises again, the games will return. Not because they must, but because humans, from the very beginning, have carried within them a simple, enduring truth. To play is to be alive. Morning arrives gently. A thin line of light stretches across the horizon, and with it comes movement. Not rushed, not urgent, just the quiet rhythm of another day beginning. The village stirs, and almost instinctively, so does the desire to play. Work will come, tending fires, gathering food, shaping tools, but before the day fully unfolds, there is a softness in the air, a space where imagination can breathe. Children gather near an open patch of earth, still cool from the night. One kneels down and begins tracing shapes into the soil with a stick, circles, lines, small grids. Others watch, heads tilted in curiosity. Soon, small stones are placed within the markings. A new game is forming. It requires memory this time, pattern recognition, anticipation. One player moves a stone, the other responds. There are pauses, long, thoughtful pauses where nothing happens except quiet thinking. In these silences, something powerful is developing: patience. Across the clearing, a different game takes shape. A group decides to test strength. A rope made from twisted plant fibers is stretched between two teams. Feet dig into the ground, hands tighten. There is a moment before the pull, a shared inhale, and then effort surges through their bodies. Dust lifts gently into the air as they strain, not in anger, but in spirited determination. Muscles tremble, laughter breaks tension. Eventually, one side gives way, tumbling into the sand in a wave of amused collapse. There are no grudges, only exhilaration. And beneath that exhilaration, unity. Even competition here strengthens bonds rather than divides them. Nearby, two elders sit facing each other with carved pieces laid out between them. This game is older, slower. It has been played for many seasons. Their fingers move deliberately. One shifts a piece forward, the other leans back slightly, eyes narrowing in thought. Children occasionally wander close, drawn not by noise, but by stillness. They sense that something important is happening in the quiet. Strategy, foresight, restraint. The elders do not explain the rules outright, they allow observation to teach. The lesson is not just in how to move a piece, but in how to think before moving at all. As the sun rises higher, games evolve again. A small group heads toward a nearby stream. Smooth stones lie scattered along the bank. One child picks up a flat one and flicks it across the water. It skips once, twice, then sinks. The others try. Soon they are experimenting, adjusting angles, grip, speed. Each attempt becomes a tiny study in physics, though they would not call it that. They simply feel the difference between success and failure. They adapt, they improve, they try again. Further away, older youths test speed. They mark two distant trees and race between them. The path is uneven, the ground unpredictable. Balance matters as much as strength. Breathing grows heavy, feet pound softly against earth. One stumbles, regains footing, continues. Winning matters, but not as much as the thrill of motion. The wind brushing against the face, the heartbeat rising, the reminder that the body is alive and capable. By midday, the village hums with quiet vitality. Work and play weave together seamlessly. Someone shaping clay pauses to watch a game. A hunter returning from the fields joins briefly in a toss of stones before tending to his tools. There is no strict boundary separating responsibility from recreation. They flow into one another. As afternoon light softens, a circle forms again, this time for storytelling woven with performance. One person begins recounting a tale of a clever fox who outsmarted a stronger rival. As the story unfolds, children act it out dramatically. Exaggerated movements, playful expressions, moments of suspense followed by relieved laughter. The audience leans in, captivated. Story becomes game, game becomes lesson, lesson becomes memory, and memory becomes tradition. When evening approaches once more, fatigue settles in, but it is a satisfying fatigue, the kind that follows movement, laughter, challenge, and connection. Fires are lit again, shadows stretch, the sounds of the day fade into softer tones. But beneath the quiet, something steady remains, the understanding that play is not separate from survival. It strengthens the body without harshness. It sharpens the mind without pressure. It deepens relationships without force. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds each person that beyond labor and necessity, there is room for joy. As stars slowly reveal themselves overhead, the village grows still. Yet in dreams, the games continue. The races are run again, the stones skip farther, the clever fox escapes once more, and with the coming dawn, new games will be invented, not because they are required, but because the human spirit, even in ancient times, has always reached naturally toward imagination, connection, and gentle challenge. To play is not an invention of civilization, it is one of its foundations. There are days when the sky is heavy with clouds, when the air feels thick and still, and even the usual rhythms of work slow to a quieter pace. On such days, play changes. It becomes softer, closer to the ground, more thoughtful. Inside the shelter of woven walls and shaded spaces, small groups gather. The games here require less movement, but more attention. A flat surface of packed earth becomes a board. Lines are carved carefully with a sharpened stick. Small tokens, stones, seeds, carved bits of bone are placed with intention. The players sit facing one another. Between them rests possibility. One moves a piece forward, then waits. There is something almost sacred in the waiting, a stillness that feels deliberate. The other studies the arrangement, imagining future moves, tracing invisible paths in the mind before committing to action. In this quiet exchange, something powerful is unfolding. Not speed, not strength, but foresight. A child watching nearby begins to understand that every action has consequence, that patience can be as strong as force, that sometimes the wisest move is restraint. Outside, where the clouds dim the light, younger children invent stories with their hands. They fold leaves into shapes, stack small stones into towers, balance sticks in unlikely arrangements. They challenge one another without speaking. Whose tower will stand longer? Whose structure will reach higher? The wind becomes an unpredictable opponent. When a tower collapses, there is no frustration that lingers, only a brief pause, and then rebuilding. Failure is temporary. Try again. Across the clearing, two boys practice throwing small wooden rings toward a planted stick. The distance changes each round. They adjust their stance, their grip, their breathing. One throws too hard, the ring skids past. The other too soft, it falls short. Gradually, through repetition, their bodies learn what their minds cannot fully explain. They feel the balance between effort and control, and in that balance, they grow. As afternoon deepens, a different kind of entertainment begins to take shape, one that requires no objects at all. A circle forms. One person steps into the center and begins a rhythmic chant. It is low at first, steady, almost like a heartbeat. Others join in, clapping softly in time. A dance emerges, not rehearsed, not choreographed, but instinctive. Feet tap against earth, arms rise and fall. Movements mirror animals, weather, the flow of water. Children laugh as they imitate exaggerated gestures. Elders smile, recognizing patterns passed down from generations before them. This is more than amusement. It is memory in motion. The dance carries stories of hunts long ago, of journeys across vast lands, of ancestors whose names may no longer be spoken, but whose rhythms remain alive in the body. The circle tightens, the chant grows warmer, fuller. For a moment, there is no separation between player and observer. Everyone belongs. When the dance ends, breath is heavy but peaceful. Faces glow in the muted light. A sense of togetherness lingers like warmth from a fading fire. As evening approaches once more, the children drift back toward quieter games. Some lie on their backs, watching clouds slowly shift overhead. They trace shapes in the sky, inventing creatures and legends. One points to a drifting formation and whispers of a giant bird. Another insists it is a ship sailing through the heavens. They debate gently, not to win, but to imagine. Nearby, an elder begins recounting a tale, not dramatically, not loudly, but in a calm, measured voice. The story blends truth and myth seamlessly. A hero who once played the same games they play now, a clever trickster who won not by strength, but by thinking differently. The children listen. They see themselves in the stories, and quietly they understand something essential. Play is not separate from who they are. It prepares them, it connects them, it reminds them that life is not only about survival, but about meaning. When darkness finally settles and the last embers of the fire glow faintly, the village rests again. The day's games have ended, but their effects remain in stronger muscles, sharper thinking, deeper bonds. And tomorrow, without announcement, without instruction, it will all begin again. Because long before stadiums and theaters, long before written rules and organized sport, humans discovered something simple and enduring: to gather, to imagine, to challenge one another gently, to laugh, and in doing so, to feel fully alive. Over time, something begins to change. What once started as simple play, stones tossed in the dust, races between trees, quiet strategy in the shade, slowly grows in meaning. The games are no longer only for passing time, they begin to mark time. Seasons pass, harvests come and go, children grow taller, elders move slower. And with each cycle, certain games return at specific moments. After the first heavy rains, there is a race. After the harvest moon, there is a contest of strength. When the air turns cool and dry, there is a gathering unlike the others. The village prepares days in advance. This is no longer casual play. This is ritual. The clearing is swept carefully, stones are arranged in deliberate patterns, lines are carved into the earth not by children experimenting, but by elders who remember how it has always been done. The atmosphere changes. There is still excitement, but now it carries weight. Young men and women stand at the edge of the clearing, quieter than usual. They stretch their limbs, they focus their breath. They know this game matters, not because of a prize, but because of recognition. To win here is to be seen differently. To lose is not shameful, but it teaches something deeper. The first event begins with running, not a playful chase, a true test. Two markers stand far apart beyond the village boundary. The path between them crosses uneven ground, loose sand, shallow water. The runners wait. The air is still. Then a signal, simple and sharp. They move, not wildly, not recklessly, controlled speed. Every step deliberate. The crowd does not shout loudly. They watch with focused attention. They understand the terrain. They know where the ground dips unexpectedly. One runner stumbles slightly, recovers. Another conserves energy early, accelerates near the end. When it finishes, there is no wild celebration, just nods, respectful silence, a quiet placing of a woven band around the winner's wrist. Honor, not spectacle. Next comes strength. A heavy stone rests in the center of the clearing. It has been used for generations, smoothed by hands, darkened by time. Each contender approaches alone. They squat, grip, lift. Some raise it to their knees, some to their chest, a few manage above their shoulders. The stone returns to earth with a dull, grounded thud. No ridicule, no mockery, only acknowledgement, because strength here is not dominance, it is responsibility. Those who prove strong may be called upon in times of need. Then, as the sun lowers, the final game begins. Strategy. The carved board is placed in the center once more, larger than the casual versions children play. The pieces are carefully shaped, distinct. Two players sit opposite each other. The village gathers close. Silence deepens. This game can last hours. Moves are slow, calculated, observed by many eyes. Young children lean forward, studying patterns. They are not merely watching entertainment, they are watching thinking. They see how patience defeats impulse, how sacrifice can create advantage, how sometimes retreat is preparation. When the match ends, the players rise. They touch foreheads briefly, a gesture of mutual respect. No one leaves unchanged. As darkness falls, fires are lit. But tonight, the stories told are different. They speak of past champions, of legendary contests decades ago, of moments when someone underestimated surprised everyone. These games are now woven into identity. They define stages of life. A child plays for joy, a youth competes for recognition, an adult carries the memory of both, and the elder remembers when he once stood in that same clearing, heart steady, waiting for the signal to run. What began as simple amusement has become tradition. What began as laughter has become legacy. And yet, beneath all the ritual, all the structure, all the expectation, the original spirit remains. Movement, challenge, connection. Even in ceremony, the heart of play still beats quietly. Because at its core, these games are not about victory, they are about becoming. Becoming faster, stronger, wiser, more disciplined. And in a world without written tests, without formal schools, without medals carved in gold, this is how a community measures growth, not with applause, but with presence. Under a sky turning deep gray blue, the village settles again. The clearing empties. The carved lines remain in the earth, waiting for the next season, for the next generation, for the next young contender standing at the edge, feeling the quiet weight of the moment, ready to run. The arena did not erupt in cheers. It exhaled. The kind of exhale that follows something irreversible. Marcus stood alone in the dust, not victorious, not celebrated, just standing. Across from him, Cassian lay on his side, still breathing, but no longer rising. The referee priest watched both men carefully. The ritual had rules, the people had expectations, the emperor had pride. But the old laws were older than pride. Marcus lowered his blade, not in surrender, in refusal. The crowd stirred, confused at first, then restless. Cassian, blood streaking down his shoulder, forced himself to one knee. He looked at Marcus not with anger, but understanding. He had felt it too. The shift. This was no longer about strength. The priest stepped forward. "Finish it." His voice was calm, controlled, absolute. Marcus did not move. The wind pushed sand across the arena floor, drawing lines between them like quiet boundaries. Cassian spoke first. "You could end it." Marcus replied without looking at him. "I already did." The crowd did not understand the words, but they felt the defiance. The emperor leaned forward. There are moments in power when authority is tested without a sword being raised. This was one of them. The priest repeated the command, "Finish the game." Marcus turned, slowly, and for the first time since entering the arena, he faced not his opponent, but the throne. His voice carried without shouting. This was never the game. The air tightened. Cassian rose to his feet beside him, not against him, beside him. Two opponents, now aligned. The emperor's jaw stiffened. He did not like unity. Unity could not be controlled as easily as fear. The priest raised his staff. Guards shifted, and then something unexpected happened. The crowd did not chant for blood. They watched. Silence spread like ink through water, because for the first time, the audience was not witnessing combat. They were witnessing choice. Marcus stepped forward and placed his sword on the sand. Cassian followed. Metal touching earth echoed louder than any clash before it. The priest hesitated. The emperor stood. "You deny Rome?" Marcus answered plainly, "I deny the lie." The words were not loud, but they carried weight. This arena had trained men to kill for spectacle. It had conditioned crowds to cheer for suffering. It had crowned brutality as glory. But now, two warriors had broken the rhythm. And when rhythm breaks, control weakens. The guards moved closer, but slowly, uncertain. The emperor scanned the crowd, searching for rage, for outrage, for demand. Instead, he saw something worse: reflection. People were not angry, they were thinking. Cassian turned to Marcus quietly. "They will make an example of us." Marcus nodded. "Then let it be a different example." The priest lowered his staff halfway. He had overseen hundreds of games. He had never seen one end like this. The emperor finally spoke. "Remove them." Not execution, not yet. Remove. Even rulers understand timing. As the guards approached, Marcus did not resist. Neither did Cassian. They walked side by side out of the arena gates. The crowd did not boo. They did not cheer. They watched. And sometimes watching is more dangerous than shouting. Because when people see courage without violence, they begin to question the rules. And that is how games truly end. Not with death, but with disobedience. The dust settled behind them. The arena remained standing, but something inside it had cracked, and cracks spread. The gates closed behind them with a hollow, final sound. Not the clang of triumph, not the roar of defeat. Just a door shutting. Marcus and Cassian were led through corridors carved from stone older than memory. Torches flickered along the walls, their light bending in the moving air. Shadows stretched long and thin, following them like silent witnesses. Neither man spoke. Not because they had nothing to say, but because some moments are too large for words. They were separated at the inner chamber, iron doors, heavy, cold. Marcus was pushed into a narrow cell lit only by a thin shaft of light from a slit high above. Dust drifted slowly in the beam, floating as if time itself had slowed down. He sat, back against stone, breathing steady. For years he had prepared for battle, for pain, for death, but not for this, not for stillness. The strange thing about defiance is this: the loudest act is often followed by the quietest consequence. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. In darkness, time becomes uncertain. Footsteps approached. The door opened, not roughly, carefully. The priest entered alone, without guards, without staff. He stood a few paces away from Marcus and studied him. "You could have been champion," the priest said softly. Marcus did not look up. "I was never fighting for that." The priest walked closer, hands folded within his robes. "Do you understand what you've done?" "Yes." "And you feel no fear?" Marcus lifted his eyes. "I feel it. I simply chose something heavier." The priest watched him for a long moment. Then he spoke in a tone that no longer sounded ceremonial. "You disrupted order." Marcus answered calmly, "No, I revealed it." The torchlight flickered between them. Outside the cell, the empire still stood. The emperor still ruled. The arena still existed. But something invisible had shifted. The priest leaned closer. "The emperor will not execute you." Marcus's expression did not change. "He will not make you a martyr." A small pause. "He will send you away." Exile. A slower disappearance. Marcus nodded once. "And Cassian?" The priest hesitated. "He is being questioned." Marcus's jaw tightened, just slightly. The priest noticed. "Why spare him?" Marcus looked toward the narrow beam of light. "Because he understood." Silence returned, but this silence was different from the one in the arena. This silence held thought, reflection, possibility. The priest finally turned toward the door. "Do you believe others will follow you?" Marcus did not answer immediately. He thought of the crowd, not their cheers, but their faces, still, watching. "Yes," he said at last, "not today, but soon." The priest left without another word. The door shut again. Night fell outside. In another chamber, Cassian sat across from imperial officers. They asked him why he had stood beside Marcus. He gave no speeches, no grand declarations, only one sentence. It was no longer a game. The officers did not understand that sentence fully, but they wrote it down. In the city above, whispers moved quietly through streets and homes. Not rebellion, not yet. Just questions. Why did the fighters refuse? What did they see? What was the lie? Questions are seeds, and seeds do not shout when they are planted. They wait. By morning, Marcus would be removed from the city walls. Cassian's fate remained undecided, but the arena, once certain, unquestioned, absolute, now carried doubt within its foundation, and doubt, once born, does not die easily. In the stillness of his cell, Marcus closed his eyes, not in defeat, not in regret, but in understanding. The game had not ended. It had changed, and the next move would not be played with swords. Dawn arrived without ceremony. No drums, no crowds, no announcement. Marcus was escorted through a smaller gate, one used for supply carts and forgotten things. The city walls rose behind him, pale in the early gray-blue light. From a distance, they looked eternal. Up close, they were only stone. 2 guards rode with him until the road forked at the dry riverbed. There, without insult or farewell, they removed his restraints and turned back toward the city. Exile did not require chains. It required distance. Marcus stood alone for the first time in years. No crowd watching, no emperor measuring him, no priest interpreting his actions, just open land stretching toward the horizon. He did not feel free. Not yet. Freedom, he understood now, is not the absence of walls. It is the absence of fear. And fear lingers longer than iron. He began walking. Each step carried the weight of memory, the arena floor beneath his feet, the sand clinging to sweat, the roar of thousands rising like a storm. He remembered the first time he entered those gates as a young fighter, heart pounding not with courage, but with terror. He had thought survival was strength. He had been wrong. Survival without integrity is only delay. The road curved through low hills scattered with olive trees. A small farming village lay ahead, smoke rising from simple homes, children already working beside their elders. They saw him before he reached them. A stranger, scarred, quiet. Villagers learn quickly to assess danger. Marcus kept his hands visible. He carried no blade now, only a small pack of bread and water given without explanation before he was expelled. An older man approached him at the edge of the field. "You come from the city?" It was not a question. Marcus nodded. "And you do not return?" "No." The farmer studied the scars along Marcus's arms. "Soldier?" "Something like that." The old man did not press further. Rural people understand when to stop asking. "You may work if you are able." Marcus bowed his head slightly. "I am able." And so the former arena warrior began lifting baskets of grain instead of swords. He repaired fences instead of breaking bodies. He carried water jars instead of shields. At first, the villagers watched him carefully. Strength without context unsettles people. But Marcus did not boast. He did not instruct. He did not dominate. He worked. When children asked about the scars, he answered simply, "I used to fight." "Did you win?" "Not in the way that matters." They did not understand fully, but they felt something different about him. At night, he sat outside the small shelter they offered him and listened to the quiet countryside. Crickets replaced the roar of crowds. Wind replaced the chanting of names. And in that quiet, he noticed something. Peace is unfamiliar to those trained for war. It arrives gently and waits to see if you will reject it. Days turned into weeks. Rumors traveled even beyond city walls. Traders passing through spoke in lowered voices of unrest in the arena. Attendance had dropped. Spectators were quieter. Some matches ended early. Fighters hesitated. A phrase had begun circulating. "It is no longer a game." Marcus heard it once from a passing merchant and felt no pride, only responsibility. Cassian's fate remained unknown. That uncertainty stayed with him like a shadow. One evening, as the sky dimmed into that familiar muted gray blue, a rider approached the village. Not armored, not imperial, alone. Marcus recognized him before he dismounted. Cassian looked thinner, older, but alive. They stood facing one another in the open field where wheat swayed gently around them. "You survived," Cassian said quietly. "So did I." They did not embrace. Warriors rarely do. But there was something stronger than an embrace: understanding. Cassian glanced toward the horizon. "The arena is changing." Marcus listened without interrupting. Some refuse to kill now, not openly, but they hesitate, and when hesitation spreads, fear spreads with it. Marcus nodded once. Fear of what? Of seeing the truth. They stood in silence as the wind moved between them. The empire still stood, the emperor still ruled, the arena still opened its gates, but somewhere beneath the spectacle, something irreversible had begun. Not rebellion, not revolution, but awakening. And awakenings do not explode. They spread quietly, like cracks in stone. The morning after Cassian arrived, the village did not change, but it felt different. 2 warriors now walked among farmers. 2 men once shaped by the roar of crowds now moved quietly between rows of wheat and stone wells and grazing animals. The villagers accepted Cassian the same way they had accepted Marcus, cautiously at first, then naturally. Because villages understand something empires forget. People are measured by how they live, not by how loudly their names were once shouted. Cassian adjusted slowly. His body was still tuned for sudden violence. He woke before sunrise, muscles tense, eyes scanning shadows that no longer held enemies. When he worked the fields, he moved with careful precision, as if every swing of the harvesting blade was part of a forgotten training drill. Marcus noticed. One evening, as they carried water from the river, Cassian finally spoke the thought that had been following him since leaving the city. "Do you think it mattered?" Marcus did not answer immediately. He set the clay jar down beside the bank and watched the water move around smooth stones beneath the surface. "Not yet," he said softly. Cassian frowned slightly. "Then why does it feel like something has already changed?" Marcus crouched, dipping his fingers into the cool current. The water slipped through them effortlessly. "Because truth does not change the world all at once, it changes how people see it." Cassian sat beside him. "In the arena," he said, "after they removed us, there were matches where fighters barely struck each other. The crowd became restless, they wanted blood, but when it didn't come, they grew quiet instead." He paused. Quiet, like they were waiting to understand what they were feeling. Marcus nodded. That is how doubt begins. They sat together listening to the water. The sky above them slowly darkened toward evening, fading into that familiar muted gray blue that seemed to settle gently over the world like a blanket of calm reflection. Cassian broke the silence again. "The emperor replaced several trainers," he said. "He increased punishments, forced fighters to perform harsher exhibitions before official matches." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Fear always becomes louder before it collapses. Cassian studied him. "You speak as if you already know the ending." "I do not," Marcus replied calmly. "I only know how fragile systems become when they depend on spectacle." The wind moved through the tall grass behind them, whispering through the field like distant voices. For several days, life continued peacefully. They worked, they rested, they helped repair irrigation channels damaged by the last heavy rain. The villagers slowly began asking them questions, not about battles, but about discipline. "How do you stay calm when danger comes?" one young boy asked Cassian while they stacked hay. Cassian hesitated, surprised by the simplicity of the question. "You breathe," he answered finally. The boy tilted his head. "That's all?" Cassian smiled faintly. "It is harder than it sounds." Meanwhile, travelers passing through the village carried new stories from the capital. Some arenas had begun shortening matches because fighters exhausted themselves too quickly, not from combat, but from hesitation. Trainers complained that new recruits asked too many questions. Spectators debated openly whether victory achieved through mercy showed weakness or wisdom. One traveling merchant shared something unusual while resting at the village fire. "Attendance is still large," he said, chewing slowly, "but the cheering, it sounds different, like people are shouting because they remember they are supposed to, not because they feel it." Marcus listened quietly from the edge of the firelight. Cassian glanced toward him. Neither spoke, but both understood the meaning beneath the words. The ripple had begun. Not visible enough to threaten the empire, not strong enough to topple tradition, but steady, persistent. And ripples have a patient nature. They expand outward, touching places the original stone never sees. Late one night, unable to sleep, Marcus walked alone to the hill overlooking the village. From there, he could see the faint glow of distant towns along the trade road. Somewhere beyond those hills, the arena still stood beneath torches and banners and polished marble seats. He wondered about the fighters still trapped inside that rhythm, the young ones especially, those who still believed glory required cruelty. He lowered himself onto the grass, staring at the sky where thin clouds drifted slowly across the moon. For years, he had believed strength was proven through domination, but here, in exile, strength looked different. Strength looked like restraint. Strength looked like planting seeds you may never see grow. Behind him, he heard footsteps in the grass. Cassian joined him without speaking. They sat side by side, two shadows against the dim horizon. "Do you regret it?" Cassian asked eventually. Marcus thought for a long time. "No," he said. Cassian nodded once. "Neither do I." Below them, the village fires flickered gently, small and steady against the dark landscape, and far beyond the hills, unseen but slowly transforming, the empire continued its games, unaware that the rules were already beginning to change. The harvest season arrived quietly. Fields turned from green to gold, and the air carried the dry scent of grain ready to be gathered. Marcus and Cassian worked alongside the villagers from dawn until the sun rested low in the sky, their movements steady, almost meditative. Life had found a rhythm here. Wake, work, eat, rest. No crowds, no chanting, no command to kill. And yet, the arena had not left them. It lived in memory. It lived in reflex. Sometimes, when a tool slipped from a farmer's hand and struck the ground too sharply, Cassian's body would tense as if anticipating attack. Marcus would notice the tightening of his jaw, the slight shift in stance. The body remembers what the mind wishes to forget. One evening, as the villagers gathered to celebrate the first full storage of grain, a caravan approached from the eastern road. Traders, entertainers, and messengers traveled together in a long procession of wagons and horses. With them came news. The capital was restless, not in flames, not in rebellion, but unsettled. A storyteller traveling with a caravan shared what he had witnessed. He said as the villagers leaned closer to the fire, "The matches continue, but something is wrong. Fighters hesitate. Some refuse the final strike unless ordered twice. The crowd still fills the seats, but the sound is thin." He paused, as if searching for the right word. "It is like applause given out of habit." Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not pride, not satisfaction, responsibility. Cassian asked quietly, "And the Emperor?" The storyteller glanced around before answering. "He has announced grander events, larger spectacles, exotic beasts, foreign champions brought in chains." Marcus lowered his gaze. "Noise," he murmured. Cassian nodded. When belief weakens, authority increases volume. The villagers did not fully grasp the weight of what was being discussed. To them, the arena was distant, a place of stories and rumors. But to Marcus and Cassian, it was a machine, one they had once fueled with blood. Later that night, after the celebration quieted and most had returned to their homes, a young man from the village approached them hesitantly. "I heard you were champions," he said. Marcus shook his head gently. "We were participants." The young man hesitated. "I was thinking of traveling to the capital to join the games." Cassian studied him carefully. "Why?" The answer came quickly. "Glory, wealth, a name." Marcus stood slowly, motioning for the young man to walk with them beyond the firelight. The sky above was deep and still, the stars sharp against the muted gray-blue of night. Marcus said calmly, "You think the arena makes men powerful?" The young man nodded. Marcus turned to face him fully. "The arena makes men visible," he said. "There is a difference." Cassian added, "Power is what remains when no one is watching." The young man frowned, uncertain. "But you were celebrated." Marcus's voice did not rise. "Yes, and celebrated men are owned." Silence settled between them. The wind moved softly through dry grass. Cassian placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "If you go, understand this. The games are not what they seem. They teach you to perform strength, not to build it." The young man looked from one to the other, absorbing the words slowly. "And you?" he asked. "If you could return to that moment, would you choose differently?" Marcus answered without hesitation, "No." Cassian echoed him, "No." Because despite exile, despite uncertainty, they had chosen alignment over survival. The young man left them thoughtful. Perhaps he would still go, perhaps not. Seeds had been planted. In the weeks that followed, more travelers arrived with similar stories. Minor refusals in smaller arenas, fighters demanding fairer terms, spectators leaving before the final blow. Nothing dramatic, but consistent. The Emperor responded as expected, increasing pressure, tightening control, demanding loyalty oaths from gladiators before each event. But something intangible had shifted. The arena still stood, the banners still waved, the gates still opened, yet the applause no longer felt natural. And when applause becomes forced, it loses power. One late afternoon, as Marcus repaired a wooden cartwheel, Cassian approached with a distant look in his eyes. "They are sending recruiters to villages now," he said. Marcus continued working. They will find fewer volunteers. Cassian watched the road stretching toward the capital. Or they will find those who have not yet learned. Marcus set down the tool and stood. Then we teach, not through speeches, not through rebellion, but through example, through discipline without cruelty, strength without spectacle. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, the village children gathered around Marcus and Cassian, asking them to demonstrate training exercises. Not combat, balance, breath control, endurance. The lessons were simple. Stand steady, move with purpose, breathe before reacting. And as the children practiced beneath the dimming sky, laughter mixing with effort, something quiet but powerful took root. The arena had trained bodies for destruction. Here, they were training minds for awareness. Far beyond the hills, the emperor prepared grander games. But in this small village, without marble seats or roaring crowds, a different kind of strength was being built, and it required no applause at all. Autumn deepened. The fields were harvested, the grain stored, and the evenings grew longer. The air carried a cool stillness now, and with it came more travelers, more voices, more fragments of the same story. The arena was louder than ever, and yet weaker. One merchant described it with careful hands, as though shaping fragile glass. "They've made it grand," he said. "Torches twice as tall, drums before every match, announcements that shake the walls, foreign beasts dragged in from distant lands." He leaned closer to the fire. But the people, they watched differently now. Marcus listened without interrupting. Cassian stared into the flames. "How?" he asked. "They don't rise to their feet as quickly. They hesitate before cheering. Some leave early, some don't look at all." The merchant shrugged. "It is strange. The arena feels like a stage where everyone remembers their lines, but no longer believes the story." Silence followed, because belief is the true foundation of spectacle. Without belief, noise becomes hollow. A few days later, a rider arrived alone at dusk, not armored, not official, young. He dismounted stiffly, his face pale beneath travel dust. Marcus recognized the posture immediately. Arena trained. The man approached slowly. "I was told you live here," he said quietly. Marcus nodded. "I saw what you did in the final match." Cassian stepped forward slightly. "You were there?" The young man nodded. "I was waiting to compete that day. I thought you were foolish at first." He swallowed. "But something changed after." He looked down at his hands. "I cannot fight the same way anymore." The confession hung in the cool air. Marcus stepped closer. "What stops you?" The answer came in a whisper. "I see them as men now." There it was, the fracture, the shift that cannot be undone. Cassian asked, "What will you do?" The young fighter hesitated. "If I refuse openly, they punish me. If I obey, I betray myself." Marcus studied him carefully. "There is a third path," he said calmly. The young man looked up. "You fight differently." Cassian understood immediately. "You endure, you defend, you refuse the final blow unless forced." Marcus nodded. "They can command action. They cannot command conviction." The young fighter breathed slowly, absorbing the weight of it. "But what if they make an example of me?" Marcus's voice remained steady. then your example will travel farther than your victories ever could. The wind moved through the dry leaves behind them. Fear was present, but so was something stronger: clarity. That night, the young fighter stayed in the village. He watched as Marcus trained the children: balance drills, breath control, stillness exercises. No aggression, no brutality. Strength built inward first. Before sleeping, the young man asked one final question. "Did you know it would spread?" Marcus looked toward the dark horizon. "No," he said, "but I knew truth cannot remain contained once seen." Far away, the emperor's advisors were reporting troubling patterns: increased hesitation among fighters, subdued audience reactions, more medical retirements, less decisive finishes. The emperor demanded harsher discipline: mandatory oaths before matches, punishments for mercy, public lashings for hesitation. But fear, once used too often, begins to lose efficiency. It exhausts both the ruler and the ruled. Back in the village, dawn came quietly again. The young fighter prepared to leave. Cassian handed him a simple leather band, not a symbol of rank, but of reminder. "For breath," Cassian said. He wrapped it around his wrist. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember," he said softly, "you are not there to win applause." As he rode away, dust rising behind him, the village returned to its rhythm: work, training, silence. But beneath the quiet fields, beneath the steady work of ordinary hands, something was shifting across the empire. The arena still stood, the games still began, but hesitation was growing. And hesitation, in a system built on certainty, is the beginning of collapse. The cracks were no longer invisible. They were spreading, slowly, quietly, inevitably. Winter approached without snow. The air turned sharp and thin, carrying sound farther than usual. In the early mornings, when Marcus and Cassian trained before the village stirred, even the smallest movement, a foot pressing gravel, a slow exhale, seemed amplified. Discipline feels different in cold air, clearer, less forgiving. They trained not for combat, but for control: balance on uneven stone, breath held under strain, movement slowed to deliberate precision. The children who joined them had grown stronger, not hardened, but steadier. Their eyes did not burn with hunger for glory. They carried curiosity instead. And curiosity, Marcus knew, was safer than ambition. One afternoon, as frost clung lightly to the dry grass, another messenger arrived. Not a fighter this time, a woman. Her cloak bore the faded colors of the capital's inner district. Her posture suggested someone accustomed to observing rather than participating. She requested to speak privately. Marcus and Cassian listened as she removed her gloves slowly, warming her hands near the fire. "I record events," she said simply. "Public events, official matches, declarations." Her eyes moved between them carefully. "The Emperor is concerned." Cassian's expression did not change. "About?" "Control." The word lingered. She continued. "There have been 4 matches this month where neither fighter struck the final blow. In one, both laid down their weapons." Marcus remained still. "The crowd did not riot," she added. "They watched." She studied Marcus's face closely. Some even applauded. Cassian exhaled slowly. The woman leaned forward. "You should understand something. The emperor does not fear death in the arena. He fears silence. Marcus met her gaze. Silence? Yes, she said. When blood spills, the crowd roars. When mercy is shown, they grow quiet. And in that quiet, they begin thinking. The fire cracked softly between them. Thinking crowds are difficult to command. She continued, there are debates now in the city, not openly, but in homes. Is strength brutality? Is courage obedience? What is honor? Cassian glanced at Marcus. The ripple had reached the center. The woman lowered her voice further. You are being spoken of again. Marcus did not flinch. As traitor? She paused. As catalyst. The word felt heavier. She reached into her satchel and withdrew a small parchment. An official decree will soon require every fighter to swear loyalty not only to the emperor, but to the spirit of the games. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. The spirit? Yes, she said. Cassian almost smiled. And what is that spirit? The woman answered carefully. Victory at any cost. There it was, defined, written, institutionalized. Marcus spoke softly. When a system must define its own spirit, it is already weakening. The woman studied him for a long moment. You understand this better than most, she said. I understand what fear does when disguised as tradition. She folded the parchment again. There are others in the capital who agree quietly. Officials? Cassian asked. Scholars, physicians, even some retired champions. Marcus nodded once. Belief erodes from within. The woman stood. You may not return to the city, but your choice has. Before leaving, she turned back one final time. The emperor prepares a grand winter exhibition, larger than any before. Foreign kings invited, massive spectacle. Marcus did not ask why. He already knew. When cracks spread, power builds monuments. That night, wind moved heavily through the trees. Marcus stood outside alone, watching the horizon where distant lights flickered faintly beyond hills. Cassian joined him. They will try to drown it in noise, Cassian said. Yes. Will it work? Marcus considered the question carefully. For a time, he answered. They stood quietly. The sky above carried that same muted gray-blue, heavy with stillness. In the capital, fighters trained under stricter supervision. Oaths were recited before every match. Whips cracked for hesitation. And yet, hesitation remained. Because once a man sees another refuse to kill, the image does not disappear. It lingers, it questions, it unsettles. The winter exhibition would come. The emperor would attempt to restore certainty. But beneath the marble floors and golden banners, the sound of hesitation was spreading, and it was louder than applause. Winter did not bring snow to the capital. It brought spectacle. For weeks, messengers traveled in every direction announcing the Grand Winter Exhibition, the largest event in the arena's history. Foreign dignitaries were invited, exotic banners were raised, marble was polished until it reflected torchlight like liquid gold. The emperor would remind the world what strength looked like, or so he believed. In the village, word of the exhibition arrived long before the event itself. Traders spoke of massive gates reinforced with iron, new beasts brought from distant territories, special seating carved for visiting kings, and most of all, rules. clearer, stricter, unforgiving. Every fighter would swear loyalty publicly before entering the arena. Refusal meant imprisonment. Mercy without command meant punishment. The emperor would not allow hesitation to embarrass him again. Marcus listened to each report with quiet attention. Cassian paced when he heard of the new oaths. "They are tightening the cage," Cassian said one evening as they stood near the edge of the fields. "Yes," Marcus replied calmly, "and cages do not last when those inside stop fearing them." The winter sky above them carried that familiar muted gray-blue tone, heavy but still still. The village fires flickered in the distance, small and steady against the dark. Marcus had learned something in exile. Noise does not erase doubt, it exposes it. Days passed. Then, on the morning of the exhibition, the capital trembled with energy. Drums echoed through stone corridors, torches lined every archway. Crowds filled the seats before the gates even opened. Foreign dignitaries observed from elevated platforms. The emperor entered to thunderous ceremony. But even from afar, carried through the whispers of those who traveled quickly, something felt different. The first matches were brutal, deliberate, swift. The fighters, under watchful eyes, struck decisively. Blood fell heavily into sand. The crowd responded, but not with the same wild rhythm of past seasons. The cheers came, but they rose unevenly, like waves forced by wind rather than pulled by tide. Then came the main event. Two renowned champions stood opposite each other beneath the winter sky, both veterans, both loyal, both feared. They recited the oath clearly. "I fight for victory. I fight for the emperor. I fight without hesitation." The crowd echoed approval. The match began. Steel met steel in sharp bursts. The movements were precise, controlled, powerful. They fought not as men trying to survive, but as men proving obedience. And yet, something subtle occurred. One champion slipped slightly on the sand, not dramatically, just enough to open vulnerability. The other had the chance. A clean strike, a finishing blow. The moment hung suspended. The crowd leaned forward. The emperor watched from his throne. And in that suspended breath, the champion hesitated. Not long, not visible to all, but long enough to reveal choice. Instead of ending it, he stepped back, allowed his opponent to rise. The crowd reacted unevenly, confusion first, then scattered shouting. The emperor's jaw tightened. The match continued, harder now, faster, as if to compensate. Eventually, the final strike came, commanded loudly from above. The champion obeyed. The opponent fell. The crowd roared. But the roar carried strain, because they had seen the hesitation, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. Throughout the day, similar moments repeated. Tiny pauses, brief glances, microseconds of decision. The emperor's exhibition had been grand, violent, impressive, but it had not erased doubt. It had displayed it. Back in the village, Marcus felt something shift as evening settled. Cassian approached him slowly. "It has begun," Cassian said. Marcus did not ask how he knew. Some changes ripple through air before news confirms them. The wind moved quietly across the harvested fields. The arena still stood. The emperor still ruled. The winter exhibition had dazzled foreign kings. But beneath the spectacle, beneath the drums and banners and shouted oaths, hesitation had entered the ritual. And ritual, once interrupted, rarely returns unchanged. Marcus looked toward the distant hills. "The louder they make it," he said softly, "the clearer the silence becomes." Cassian nodded, and far away, in a capital built on dominance, the first true fracture widened, not with rebellion, not with fire, but with a single breath held too long before a final blow. After the winter exhibition, the capital did not erupt, it adjusted. The emperor declared the event a triumph. Messengers carried embellished accounts across provinces, tales of unstoppable champions, roaring approval, foreign kings humbled by the empire's strength. On parchment, the spectacle had succeeded, but parchment does not record pauses. It does not capture hesitation. It does not describe the way thousands of people leaned forward at the same time and felt something unfamiliar. In the weeks that followed, attendance at the arena remained high, but the sound changed. It was subtle, like wind shifting direction. Vendors noticed first. Crowds lingered outside longer than before, debating matches instead of rushing home. Arguments were quieter, less about who was strongest, more about who chose. Physicians attached to the arena reported an increase in delayed engagements, fighters prolonging matches unnecessarily. Trainers complained that younger recruits asked questions about rules, about mercy, about limits. Questions. The Empire had always provided answers. Now, questions were spreading faster. In the village, Marcus and Cassian continued their quiet routine. The fields were bare now, resting beneath a pale winter sun. Mornings were colder, breath visible in the air. Training sessions shorter, but deeper. Control, stillness, observation. One afternoon, as children practiced holding balanced stances on uneven stones, an older villager approached Marcus. "I heard the exhibition was grand," the man said cautiously. "It was large," Marcus replied. "And powerful?" Marcus looked at the children, wobbling slightly, correcting themselves, learning patience. "It was loud." The old man studied him carefully. "And what is the difference?" Marcus's voice remained calm. "Power does not need to prove itself repeatedly." The old man nodded slowly, as if storing the thought for later. That evening, another traveler arrived, a former arena guard. He did not wear uniform colors anymore. His armor had been traded for simple cloth. He sat by the fire with visible unease. "I could not remain," he admitted. Cassian watched him closely. "Why?" The guard swallowed. "Because I began to notice the crowd." Marcus leaned slightly forward. "What about them?" "They weren't watching the violence anymore. They were watching the fighters' faces." The fire cracked softly between them. "They were waiting for hesitation," he continued, "waiting to see if someone would choose differently." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. The ripple had turned into expectation. The guard looked up at them. "Some cheer mercy now, quietly, but they do." Cassian exhaled slowly. "And the Emperor?" The guard's expression tightened. "He has ordered stricter enforcement, no pauses allowed, immediate intervention if a fighter delays." Marcus nodded. "When control weakens, enforcement accelerates." The guard leaned closer. "They cannot stop what people have already seen." Silence followed, because that was the truth at the center of it all. The exhibition had revealed hesitation publicly, and once the crowd recognized it, they began looking for it, seeking it, almost hoping for it. Hope is dangerous in controlled systems because hope shifts loyalty, not loudly, but persistently. Later that night, Marcus stood alone outside his shelter. The sky carried its familiar muted gray-blue stillness. No stars visible, only a soft veil of clouds stretching across the horizon. Cassian joined him. "They are watching, Mao," Cassian said quietly. "Yes." "Waiting." Marcus nodded. "The arena has changed roles." Cassian glanced at him. "It used to display dominance." "Yes." "And now?" Marcus's voice lowered slightly. "Now it displays conscience." Cassian absorbed that slowly. In the capital, the emperor reviewed reports with tightening patience. Advisors assured him the winter exhibition had restored authority. Attendance numbers remained strong. But belief cannot be measured, and belief had shifted. Not toward rebellion, not toward uprising, but toward awareness. Fighters entered the arena now knowing that thousands were watching not just their strength, but their choice. And choice, once visible, carries weight. In the village, the former guard chose to stay. He trained with Marcus and Cassian, relearning movement without aggression, rebuilding identity without armor. The community expanded quietly. Not an army, not a movement, just individuals choosing differently. The arena still stood, the emperor still ruled, the games still continued, but something irreversible had taken root in the crowd. They no longer watched only for victory, they watched for humanity. And when a system built on spectacle begins to reveal humanity instead of brutality, its foundation begins to soften, slowly, almost imperceptibly, but undeniably. Winter tightened its grip. Frost traced thin silver lines across the fields each morning, delicate and temporary. By midday, the sun erased them as if they had never existed. Marcus often watched that quiet transformation. Some structures look permanent until warmth reveals their fragility. News from the capital arrived in heavier tones now. The emperor had revised the oath, no longer a simple declaration of loyalty. Now it was longer, sharper, publicly repeated before each match, with a crowd required to echo the final line. "I strike without doubt." The phrase traveled across provinces like a command disguised as ritual. Cassian listened as a passing trader recited it by memory. "They make the crowd say it too?" Cassian asked. The trader nodded, as one voice. Marcus's gaze drifted toward the horizon. "They are trying to bind belief." The trader frowned slightly. "Bind it?" "When you force words into mouths, you hope they will enter the mind," Marcus said quietly. The trader shivered despite the fire's warmth. "But will they?" Marcus did not answer immediately. He watched a spark lift into the air, flare briefly, then disappear into the gray-blue dusk. Not if doubt already lives there. Days later, a courier arrived in haste. The young fighter who had visited months before had competed again. He had fought skillfully, cleanly. He had defended, endured, and when the final moment came, he did not hesitate visibly, but neither did he rush. He stepped back just long enough for the crowd to feel it. Then the overseer shouted the command. Only then did he strike. The arena roared, but something in the rhythm had changed. The courier explained it carefully. It felt like the crowd was measuring the delay, he said, like they were counting the space between choice and obedience. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. That space was widening, and spaces are where transformation happens. The emperor's response was swift. Any fighter who paused beyond a heartbeat would be fined, flogged, or replaced. The oath would be enforced more strictly, guards stationed closer to the sand. Control tightened again. But tightening a system already under strain does not strengthen it. It amplifies pressure. In the village, the former guard now trained alongside the children. His posture had softened, his movements no longer sharp with suspicion. One afternoon, the former guard asked Marcus something that had been lingering in his thoughts. "Do you think the Emperor knows?" Marcus considered. He knows something is wrong. Does he know what? Marcus shook his head slightly. He believes the problem is obedience. Cassian spoke nearby, but the problem is belief. They stood in silence as wind moved across the empty winter fields. The former guard lowered his voice. If the Emperor commands the crowd to speak the oath and the crowd repeats it, does that not mean he still holds them? Marcus looked toward the village homes, smoke rising gently into cold air. Words spoken together can unify, he said, but they can also reveal emptiness. Cassian added quietly, the louder the oath, the more people feel its weight. Because when you are forced to declare certainty, you become aware of doubt. In the capital, the next series of matches began under harsher scrutiny. The crowd echoed the oath, "I strike without doubt." The words thundered across stone walls, but beneath the sound, beneath the synchronized voices, individuals felt something tightening in their chest. The phrase repeated too often begins to question itself. Without doubt, without doubt, without doubt. The arena floor grew quieter between strikes. Moments stretched fractionally longer. Some fighters compensated by attacking more aggressively. Others slowed in subtle ways, measured steps, controlled breathing, extended circling before engagement. The Emperor watched carefully from above. He saw compliance, he heard volume, but he did not feel the undercurrent. In the village, Marcus and Cassian stood again beneath a sky heavy with muted winter clouds. "They are forcing unity," Cassian said. "Yes. And what happens when forced unity cracks?" Marcus's voice remained steady. It breaks all at once. They did not speak of rebellion. They did not speak of uprising. They spoke of inevitability. Because systems built on fear can sustain obedience, but they cannot sustain awakening. And the oath, meant to eliminate hesitation, was teaching the entire empire to notice it. Each time the crowd declared certainty, they became more aware of its absence. The frost melted again the next morning, thin lines disappearing beneath sunlight. Marcus watched them fade and understood. The Emperor believed repetition would restore strength, but repetition, when hollow, erodes from within. The oath was spreading, but so was the space between its words, and in that space, the future waited. By late winter, the arena felt different. Not broken, not rebellious, but strained, like a rope pulled too tight for too long. The oath continued before every match. "I strike without doubt." The crowd repeated it in one voice. But now some mouths moved without sound. Some voices faded before the final word. Guards had begun watching the audience as much as the fighters, because doubt, once visible, does not stay contained to the sand. It travels into the seats, into the corridors, into the streets. In the village, the air was beginning to warm again. Frost appeared less often. The fields, though still bare, carried the promise of return. Marcus sensed the shift before the news arrived. Cassian noticed it in him. "You feel something," Cassian said one morning as they trained in silence. "Yes." "What?" Marcus paused mid-breath. "A turning point." 2 days later, a rider came hard from the capital. Not a trader, not a messenger for hire, a former arena physician. His cloak was torn, and his expression carried something heavier than fear. He asked for Marcus by name. They stood together at the edge of the village where the wind moved gently through dry grass. "It happened yesterday," the physician said. Marcus waited. There was a match between two younger fighters, both trained under the new enforcement, both known for discipline. Cassian folded his arms, listening closely. The oath was recited, the crowd responded, the fight began. The physician swallowed. It was even, controlled, neither reckless. He looked directly at Marcus. And then one of them was disarmed. Marcus's eyes sharpened slightly. The other had full advantage, clear, clean. The physician's voice lowered. He did not strike. Cassian's breath slowed. "For how long?" he asked. "Long enough." The words carried weight. The overseer shouted the command. Silence. He did not move. Marcus felt the shift fully now. "And the crowd?" he asked. The physician's jaw tightened. They did not chant the oath. The wind seemed to pause. "They did not shout for blood," the physician continued. "They did not demand obedience." He exhaled slowly. They waited. Cassian looked toward the distant hills as if he could see the arena from there. What happened next? The emperor stood. Guards moved in. The fighter who had hesitated finally lowered his blade. And in that moment, the disarmed opponent did something no one had commanded. He knelt, not in submission, in refusal. Refusal to continue. The physician's voice trembled slightly. The crowd rose to its feet. Marcus did not speak. "They did not chant the oath," the physician repeated. "They did not cheer violence." He looked at Marcus as if seeking confirmation that what he witnessed had meaning. They were silent. Silence. Not fearful, not confused, intentional. Cassian asked quietly, "What did the emperor do?" "He ordered both fighters seized." "Executed?" "No." The physician shook his head. He hesitated. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. The emperor had felt it, the weight of a crowd no longer moving on command. The physician continued. The match was declared void. The exhibition ended early. Cassian exhaled. And the crowd? They left without shouting. That was the fracture. Not rebellion, not riot, departure. When people no longer demand the spectacle loses its power. The physician stepped back. "There are discussions now, in private halls, in training grounds, among officials." "About what?" Cassian asked. "About whether the games still serve their purpose." Marcus opened his eyes. The air felt lighter, not safe, but different. "You should know," the physician added, "some fighters have begun refusing the oath altogether." Cassian's jaw tightened. "And?" "They are imprisoned." Marcus nodded slowly. Control was still being enforced, but enforcement now revealed insecurity. After the physician left, Marcus and Cassian stood in long silence. The field stretched quietly around them. No banners, no marble, just open land. "They waited," Cassian said softly. "Yes." The crowd waited. Marcus nodded. They were no longer participants. He looked toward the horizon, where the capital lay unseen, but shifting. They became witnesses. And witnesses are powerful, because once people witness truth, they cannot pretend blindness again. The emperor had tried to command certainty, but no one can command conscience. Spring would come soon. The frost would vanish entirely. The fields would green again. And in the capital, the arena still stood, but something within it had changed forever. For the first time in its history, the most powerful moment was the one no one commanded. Spring arrived softly, not with fanfare, not with sudden color, but with a gradual easing of the air. The ground, once stiff with frost, loosened. Small shoots began pushing through soil that it seemed lifeless only weeks before. Marcus noticed the first green blade at the edge of the training field. He did not point it out. He simply observed it. Growth rarely announces itself. It appears quietly and persists. News from the capital now carried a different tone, less spectacle, more uncertainty. After the match that ended in silence, the arena did not close, but its rhythm faltered. Several scheduled contests were postponed. Official explanations cited structural review and honor recalibration. Cassian almost smiled when he heard that phrase. Honor recalibration, he repeated one evening. Marcus stirred the fire gently. When language changes, he said, the structure beneath it is shifting. Reports described smaller crowds, not absent, but thinner. Those who came did not chant as forcefully. The oath was still recited, but many voices blended into a low murmur rather than unified thunder. And fighters had begun taking longer between movements, circling wider, breathing slower, watching each other more closely than ever before. The space between strikes was now expanding. That space, once measured in instinct, was now measured in awareness. One afternoon, another familiar figure arrived at the village, the young fighter who had once sought guidance. He looked older, not from years, from clarity. He dismounted calmly and approached Marcus and Cassian without urgency. "It is changing," he said simply. Marcus nodded. "Yes." The young fighter sat with them beneath a budding tree. "They tried to force us to fight harder after the silent match," he explained. "Punishments were immediate, harsh." Cassian listened carefully. "But something strange happened," the young man continued. "The more they punished hesitation, the more obvious it became." He looked down at his hands. "I used to fight to survive. Then I fought to win. Now," he paused, "now I fight to reveal." Marcus studied him. "Reveal what?" "That we always have a choice." The wind moved lightly through the new leaves above them. "Some fighters are beginning to coordinate," the young man said carefully. "Not rebellion, not openly." "How?" asked Cassian. "We extend matches. We test endurance instead of striking quickly. We exhaust spectacle." Marcus's expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. "And the crowd?" "They are patient now," the young fighter replied. "They lean forward in the pauses. They watch faces. They measure breath." Cassian exhaled slowly. "They are learning." "Yes." The young fighter looked toward the distant hills. "The Emperor has ordered special enforcers to stand near the sand, but they cannot enter every moment. They cannot interrupt every pause." Marcus nodded. "Because the pause is internal." The young fighter met his gaze. "Yes." Silence settled comfortably between them. The village children trained nearby, balancing on wooden beams, laughing softly when they wobbled. Strength built through discipline, not dominance. The contrast was quiet, but profound. In the capital, the emperor convened private councils. Advisors debated whether the game should be temporarily suspended. Some argued for greater brutality to restore fear. Others warned that too much force would expose desperation. Fear, once reliable, was no longer efficient. Spring sunlight reached higher into the arena seats now. Matches began later in the day to avoid glare. The sand felt warmer beneath bare feet. And in that warmth, hesitation no longer felt like weakness. It felt like awareness. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in that familiar muted gray-blue, Marcus walked alone to the hill overlooking the village. Cassian joined him without words. "It spreads without shouting," Cassian said. "Yes." "Do you think it will end the games?" Marcus considered carefully. No. No? Cassian frowned slightly. No. No system ends suddenly when rooted in tradition. It transforms. He looked toward the horizon. The question is not whether the arena survives. It is what it becomes. Below them, villagers prepared fields for planting. Children carried water in small clay jars. The former guard repaired a fence with steady hands. Life moved forward without spectacle. In the capital, another match ended without a decisive blow. Both fighters stepped back simultaneously, as if guided by shared instinct. The crowd did not riot. They stood and applauded. Not violence, but restraint. The emperor watched from above, understanding at last that something fundamental has shifted. He could command volume, he could enforce rules, but he could not command meaning. The space between strikes had grown wide enough for reflection, and reflection, once introduced into ritual, changes it forever. The games were still played, but they were no longer unquestioned. And sometimes, the quietest revolution is not in overthrowing power, but in redefining strength. Spring settled fully over the land. The fields around the village turned green again, soft at first, then steadily thickening with life. The air no longer carried winter's edge. It felt open, possible. In the capital, something unexpected happened. The emperor attended a match without ceremony. No grand entrance, no drums, no foreign dignitaries. He sat high above the sand, but without announcement. He wanted to observe, not the spectacle, the people. The oath was recited as always. I strike without doubt. The crowd repeated it, but the sound was uneven, not defiant, not loud, just thinner. The match began. Two seasoned fighters circled each other slowly. Their movements were controlled, almost restrained. Steel clashed, but not wildly. There were openings, clear, precise chances to end it. Neither rushed. The emperor leaned forward. He noticed something he had not allowed himself to see before. The crowd was not hungry. They were attentive, watching the fighters' eyes, watching their breath, waiting for the choice. A strike landed. One fighter fell to a knee, the other stood above him. The moment arrived, clear, familiar, expected. But instead of roaring for blood, the crowd remained still. The silence was not rebellion, it was presence. The standing fighter lowered his blade slightly, not fully, just enough to signal restraint. The emperor's hand tightened against the arm of his chair. He could command the overseer to shout, he could force the conclusion, but he hesitated for the first time. He studied the crowd. They were not looking at him, they were looking at the fighter. The power of the moment had shifted downward from throne to sand. The kneeling fighter slowly rose. The match continued. It ended not with death, but with exhaustion. Both men dropped their weapons nearly at the same time. The overseer looked upward, uncertain. The emperor did not stand. He did not order punishment. He did not demand blood. He simply remained seated, and that silence from above carried more weight than any command. The match was declared complete. No execution, no spectacle, just conclusion. Whispers moved through the arena like wind across tall grass. Something had changed, not loudly, but undeniably. In the village, a messenger arrived 3 days later with the account. Marcus listened without interruption. Cassian's expression remained unreadable. "The emperor said nothing?" Cassian asked. Nothing, the messenger confirmed. He left quietly. After the messenger departed, Marcus walked alone to the edge of the newly planted field. Cassian joined him shortly after. He saw it, Cassian said. Yes, and chose not to crush it. Marcus nodded slowly. Power sometimes survives by adapting. Cassian folded his arms. Or by recognizing its limits. The wind moved gently through young crops, bending them without breaking them. Marcus watched the movement. The arena will not disappear, but it cannot return to what it was. Cassian looked toward the horizon. The fighters know they have space now. Yes, and the crowd knows it too. In the capital, debates intensified, not about ending the games entirely, but about redefining them. Could strength be demonstrated without execution? Could endurance replace slaughter? Could honor mean restraint? Scholars spoke more openly now. Retired champions offered counsel. Even some trainers admitted that discipline did not require brutality. The emperor listened carefully, not because he had become merciful, but because he understood something essential. Authority built only on fear is unstable. Authority that adapts endures. In the following weeks, official decrees softened. The oath was shortened, the phrase, "without doubt," quietly removed. Now it read, "I fight with honor." The crowd repeated it, and this time the words felt less forced. In the village, life continued as it always had, planting, training, breathing. The former guards smiled more easily now. The young fighter visited less frequently, not because he had fallen, but because he was no longer searching. He had found alignment within the arena itself. One evening, beneath the muted gray-blue sky that had watched every stage of this quiet transformation, Cassian turned to Marcus. "It began with a refusal," he said. Marcus nodded. "And now?" "It continues with awareness." They stood in silence, listening to wind move through growing fields. The empire still stood. The arena still opened its gates, but something fundamental had shifted. The crowd no longer demanded certainty, the fighters no longer feared hesitation, and even the emperor had begun to listen. Only one more chapter remained. Summer came quietly. The fields around the village stood tall and full again, green turning slowly toward old. Cicadas hummed in the afternoons. The air felt heavy, but not oppressive, the kind of weight that comes from growth, not tension. Marcus stood at the edge of the field at sunrise, watching light spill over the hills. The world had not overturned. There had been no uprising, no fire in the streets. The emperor still ruled. The banner still hung from stone walls. The arena still opened its gates. And yet, nothing was the same. In the capital, the games had changed form. Matches no longer ended by default in death. Some still did. Violence had not vanished, but it was no longer assumed. Endurance contests grew more common. Strategic bouts replaced reckless clashes. Fighters who displayed restraint were not punished, they were studied. The oath remained simple now. "I fight with honor." The crowd spoke it without strain. Because honor no longer meant blind obedience, it meant visible choice. The emperor had learned something essential. Spectacle can command attention, but only meaning commands loyalty. He had not admitted error publicly, rulers rarely do. Instead, he reframed the change as evolution, a refinement of tradition, a strengthening of discipline, a higher standard of control. And in a way, it was. Control had shifted inward. Fighters were no longer driven solely by fear of punishment. They were guided by the awareness that thousands watched, not for blood, but for integrity. The crowd had matured. They no longer roared automatically at the final strike. They leaned forward in the pauses. They applauded strategy. They respected mercy. And sometimes, in moments that carried more weight than any spectacle, they stood in silence when a fighter chose restraint. That silence had become sacred. In the village, Marcus and Cassian continued their work. They did not return to the capital. They were invited once, quietly, to observe the new form of games. The invitation carried no accusation, no threat, just acknowledgement. Marcus declined, not from bitterness, but from understanding. Their part in the arena had ended the moment they laid down their blades. Cassian asked him once, as they repaired a wooden beam outside the storage barn, "Do you ever wish to see it again?" Marcus paused, considering honestly. "I see it clearly enough from here." Cassian nodded. Because what mattered was not the sand or the seats or the throne. What mattered was the shift, the space that had opened between instinct and action, the breath before the strike. That space had changed everything. The young fighter who once sought their guidance had become known in the capital, not for brutality, but for discipline. He won matches, he lost some, but he never rushed the final blow. And the crowd watched him closely, not as an executioner, but as a man navigating choice in full view. The former guard in the village now trained children every morning before sunrise. His voice no longer carried command, it carried steadiness. "Breathe," he would say. "Balance. Choose." The lesson had become simple. Strength is not the absence of doubt, it is the mastery of it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in that familiar muted gray blue that had framed so many turning points, Marcus and Cassian climbed the hill overlooking the fields one last time. The crops swayed in slow rhythm beneath them. No crowds, no chanting, just wind moving through growth. "It was never about ending the games," Cassian said quietly. Marcus nodded. It was about ending the lie. They stood in silence for a long time. Below them, children practiced slow movements, careful footwork, measured breathing. Laughter drifted upward, light and unforced. Far beyond the hills, in a city built of stone and ceremony, the arena still stood. But it was no longer a machine of unquestioned brutality. It had become something else, a mirror. And mirrors, when held long enough before a watching crowd, change what the crowd sees. Marcus finally spoke, voice calm and steady. "The game remains," he said. Cassian glanced at him. "Yes, but now," Marcus continued, "it is the right one. Not a game of domination, not a game of spectacle, but the quiet, constant game in every man and woman, the space between impulse and action, the breath before the strike, the choice no one can command." The wind moved gently across the hilltop. The sun disappeared. And as twilight settled softly over field and village and distant capital alike, the empire continued, but now it continued awake.